In Venezuela, 97% of the political parties participating in the national dialogue agreed on a document to guarantee the electoral processes. In Palestine, the Israeli regime continues committing war crimes with impunity. Occupation forces attacked the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis. And in Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and 85 lawmakers supported a motion calling for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. 97% of the Venezuelan political parties participating in the national dialogue agreed on a document to guarantee the electoral process. The president of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, informed during a press conference that the sectors participating in the 7th day of consultations and debates agreed on a document with 3 principles that lead to guarantee the development of an electoral process. The head of parliament stressed that during the national dialogue they met with 41 organizations of the nation's political spectrum, where they established a consensus on the reception of proposals. On the other hand, the deputy rejected the political maneuvers from abroad to interfere in the internal affairs of the country.
We have maintained the work of this broad process of dialogue, which is now in its 7th round of consultations and talks today on Ash Wednesday. We have met, and it is much more important because we have met with all sectors, the political, the economic, the cultural, the academic, the workers, the peasants, the fishermen, the students. Not only have we met with all of them, but have called them all together. No one has been left out. If someone doesn't want to participate in this round of talks, that is their problem. We have called absolutely everyone.
The president of the Venezuelan parliament described as fruitful the national dialogue where 97% of the country's political parties participated.
We are evaluating what could be the legal scope so that electoral campaigns and electoral events, in this case the presidential one, can receive some kind of financing from the state. These are elements to be considered. It has been a very fruitful meeting today with 41 political organizations and electoral movements in Venezuela. 97% of all the political parties duly registered with the National Electoral Council.
On Wednesday, the Attorney General of Venezuela, Tarek William Saab, informed that there are 19 people involved in a case of conspirative plot against his nation known as Operation Brazalete Blanco, which had the assumed objective of attacking the governor of Táchira State, Freddy Bernal, and the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. In this sense, the Attorney General addressed this destabilization plan consisted in the planning of an attack against the 21st Infantry Brigade of the Bolivarian Army. Precisely, William Saab said that a criminal group intended to take over the arms of the 21st Infantry Brigade and then assassinate Governor Freddy Bernal and subsequently initiate an escalation of terrorist acts until making an attempt against the life of President Nicolás Maduro. In this regard, Saab also said that linked to this case, 19 people have been arrested and there are also 15 arrest warrants pending to be executed.
This consisted of planning an attack against the 21 infantry brigades of the Bolivarian Army to take over the weapons of the body and then make an attempt on the life of Governor Freddy Bernal, and subsequently initiate an escalation of terrorist acts until the assassination attempt against President Nicolás Maduro.
The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Michael Fakhri, urged all member states of the organization to lift sanctions imposed on Venezuela. During his visit to Caracas, Fakhri stated that Venezuelans continue to have problems accessing enough good and healthy food due to low income. He also highlighted the government's efforts to guarantee the right to food. The high official stated that the Constitution of the South American country recognizes the right to food and food sovereignty.
During my visit, I saw firsthand how unilateral coercive measures in the form of economic sanctions have constrained the government's fiscal ability to implement their social protection programs and deliver basic public services. Unilateral coercive measures imposed against Venezuela have also increased the cost of delivering humanitarian aid, and it has prevented international financial institutions from providing any financing. The harm of these measures is felt disproportionately by people living in extreme poverty or vulnerable circumstances. Unilateral coercive measures are cruel and vicious, and they hinder the realization of the right to food. I therefore call upon all relevant states to immediately review and lift sectoral sanctions imposed on Venezuela, including secondary sanctions against third parties.
In Mexico, Parliament approved a constitutional reform to prohibit indigenous child marriage. The Chamber of the Senate unanimously approved the modification of Article 2 of the National Constitution, which establishes the prohibition of marriage of minors under 18 years of age in indigenous communities, in order to privilege the best interests of the welfare of children and adolescents. Senators highlighted the importance of guaranteeing human rights for indigenous children. They also pointed out that it seeks to eradicate this practice, which is most prevalent in rural areas, which places the country in 8th place among the countries with the highest rate of forced marriages among minors. The governments of Cuba and South Korea established diplomatic and consular relations on Wednesday, as announced by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the largest of the Antilles. Through a statement, the Cuban Foreign Ministry pointed out that the links were established through an exchange of diplomatic notes between the permanent representations of both countries to the United Nations in New York. The establishment of official relations between both countries was carried out in accordance with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, the international law, and in conformity with the spirit of and norms established in the Vienna Convention for Diplomatic Relations of April 18, 1961. Ties between the two countries began in 1949 when Havana recognized the officially named Republic of Korea, which were interrupted in 1959 after the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In another war crime committed by the Israeli army against Palestine, at least one person was killed and many others were injured during an attack by Israeli forces on Nasser hospital in Gaza's southern city of Han Yunis. At dawn on Thursday, a civilian was killed and at least 6 patients were wounded after Israeli forces bombed the hospital's orthopedic department. The Wafa news agency reported that after entering the facility, the military opened fire in different sections and then forced the evacuation of doctors, patients, and displaced Palestinians. The hospital that housed around 300 health personnel, 450 wounded, and more than 10,000 displaced people had been under siege for 25 days, with snipers targeting those inside or in its courtyards. The situation of the areas in Gaza remains very difficult. Resources are as indispensable to life as water are very hard to get. Moreover, the Israeli army continues its siege against civilians, including hospitals, and the possibility of a ground invasion is of concern to Palestinians. Our TeleSUR correspondent Noor Harsin with the details.
A new storm hit the Gaza Strip, and even though the weather is cold and wintry, but since the very early hours of this morning, and Palestinians, including Palestinian children, runs here to the closest water tank that is serving the area to manage and refill the water barrels or water tanks and take it to their homes. the situation here in Rafah is deteriorating, especially that the Palestinians fear a very near future ground invasion. However, what is the highlight these days is actually what is happening inside the Nasser hospital. Now, the Nasser hospital is being subjected to continuous Israeli attacks and bombings after the Israeli forces surrounded the hospital, besieged the hospital, asked Palestinians to leave the hospital. Yes, some of them actually managed to leave the hospital, including medical staff and journalists, but during their way to Rafah, the Israeli forces arrested a number of the people that evacuated the Al-Nasser hospital. At the same time, the Israeli tanks shelled at the Al-Nasser hospital. One of the shells actually landed on a unit that was filled with patients. This resulted in the killing of one patient and the injury of others. Now inside the Al-Nasser hospital, there is a number of patients, those who cannot walk, those who cannot move around, still on their beds, and of course, a number of the medical team refused to leave them. Noor Harazin, TeleSUR, Gaza.
From the United Nations, Arab Group representative expressed concern over the intention of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to extend military operations to Rafah.
Now we are about the new looming threat that was ordered by the Prime Minister of Israel to undertake a military operation in Rafah, where about 1.5 million Palestinians facing a very disastrous humanitarian situation. We cannot accept that the Security Council and the international community keep inert towards this very dangerous situation.
Also, Riyad Mansour, Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, assured that his country is doing every effort possible to stop Israel from depopulating the Gaza Strip.
And we are doing this to inform you. Our effort is to do everything possible to stop Israel from committing this crime of depopulating the Gaza Strip and stopping the war immediately. The guarantee to do that is to have a resolution calling for a ceasefire, and we hope that the Security Council would elevate itself to that responsibility.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan traveled to Egypt on Wednesday to meet his Egyptian counterpart and support the increasing demands for Israel to halt its war in the Gaza Strip against Hamas. Erdogan's visit comes at a time when ties between Ankara and Cairo have been growing closer again after years of tensions. In this sense, Erdogan met with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi at the Ittihadiyya Palace in Egypt's capital, and according to official sources, both leaders discussed bilateral relations and regional challenges, especially in the efforts to stop the conflict in Gaza. It should be noted that Erdogan's visit to the African nation is the first in more than a decade. We now have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In the United States, authorities report 1 dead and 21 wounded after a shooting took place during the Super Bowl celebrations in Kansas City. During a press conference, Kansas City's fire department chief reported that among the injured, 8 are life-threatening. Authorities also reported 11 of the injured are children, while the total number of casualties is not final and may still increase. The incident took place in the vicinity of the Central train station. The shooting occurred in the state of Missouri, where it is legal to carry guns on the street. In Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and 85 lawmakers supported a motion calling for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. In a parliamentary session held on Wednesday, the motion received 85 votes in favor and 42 against. The initiative calls on the United States and the United Kingdom to end the legal process against Assange and allow him to return to Australia. The 52-year-old cyber activist faces more than 18 criminal charges for offenses against the U.S. Espionage Act and risks up to 175 years in prison if he is extradited to the United States. Next February 20th and 21st, the London High Court will hold the last trial to analyze Assange's final appeal against his extradition. The 44th Summit of the Executive Council of the African Union began on Wednesday in Ethiopia. In this regard, the president of the multilateral organization, Musa Faki Mahamat, reiterated that the current institutional reform of the regional bloc seeks to strengthen their capacities to face the challenges of the changing world. For his part, Musa Faki Mahamat also said that they will address the division of labor between the African Political Organization and the regional economic community to ensure transparency and reduce shortfalls. In the meantime, the president of the African Union also pointed out that the budget execution of funding affects the credibility of the organization. In Chad, refugee and organizations have warned that the conflict in Sudan has displaced more than 700,000 refugees who are at risk of starvation. The situation resulting from the conflict in Sudan is considered one of the largest crises of human displacement resulting from war in the world. In a report, refugee organizations added that 1 out of 3 people are refugees in eastern Chad, which is an unsustainable situation as it is one of the poorest countries in the world. The World Food Programme warned that in 2023, more than 1 million people in Chad will be deprived of food aid due to financial cuts. The agency also warned that the situation is worrying because it could aggravate the existing food crisis in Central Africa with a population of more than 17 million. The United Nations urges the government of Senegal to respect the human rights of its citizens. The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights called on the Senegalese executive to guarantee a national dialogue with the broadest possible participation and to guarantee the genuine participation of the opposition groups. During the last weeks, the tensions in that West African country increased considerably following the demonstrations against President Macky Sall's decision to postpone the electoral calendar for the end of the year. Citizens consider this decision as an attempt by the president to extend his term of office and demonstrated against the situation. Hundreds of Kenyans convened for a Dark Valentine event on Wednesday to advocate against femicide in the country, where over a dozen women were killed last month. Organizers of the event expressed their concerns about the femicide increase in the country and warned that many women in the African nation don't get to live enough to see a Valentine Day. The rights groups have been alarmed by the phenomenon, calling it a pandemic and urging the government to treat it as a national disaster. According to a report by the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, in 2022 alone, Kenya recorded 725 femicide cases, the highest number since data collection began in 2015. Yet for many Kenyan women, sexual and gender-based violence is a frighteningly familiar reality.
Yes, it's Valentine's Day, but there's also a whole conversation to be had about what kind of love message are we spreading. So Dark Valentine, I was in red earlier today, but I'm somber today in black because guess what? Not a lot of people lived to see Valentine's Day. So we have to bring it into days like this so that people stop separating issues so much. Somebody today could die because of femicide. That's the unfortunate thing, because of a date gone wrong. And so it's a relevant issue to bring on a day like today.
According to Dilma Rousseff, president of the new development bank, BRICS member countries will overtake the Group of Seven in participation in world GDP in the next 4 years. During her speech at the World Government Summit held this week in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Rousseff predicted that their share in the world economic production will reach between 35% and 40% by 2028, while that of the G7 will drop to 27.8%. Likewise, the former Brazilian president pointed out that the share of emerging markets in world trade increased from 37% in 2016 to 41% in 2022, while that of the advanced economies declined from 62% to 58% over the same period. BRICS was founded in 2006 with 5 members: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. In January this year, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates became new full members. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on our social medias on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.